Happily Akimbo, the new Tony Award-winning musical about growing up and growing old, in no particular order. It's playing at the Straz Center in Tampa, now through November 23rd. Tickets and info at strazcenter.org.
If you live in the Tampa Bay area, you could see another increase in your electric bill real soon. Rates for TECO customers are set to go up in January, and it's not the only company planning an increase. I'm Matthew Petty, and coming up this hour on Florida Matters Live and Local, how much do you pay for electricity? Have you already seen your bill go up? Let us know how much you're paying. 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. You can also send us an email, FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. And later in the show, it's Florida Man. We'll talk to the creator and producer of the show, exploring the crazy headlines from Florida. All this and more is coming up on Florida Matters Live and Local, plus your calls after these news headlines.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. The Senate passed a bill forcing the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files, sending the measure to President Trump's desk. Trump has said he'd sign it into law. NPR's Claudia Grisales reports the plan drew near unanimous support in the Republican-led Congress.
The Senate quickly approved the bill by voice vote after the plan drew near unanimous support in the House. For much of the year, President Trump fought the release of the government records tied to the disgraced financier and convicted sex offender. But President Trump reversed his stance once the momentum shifted for passage of the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The legislation directs the Justice Department to release the records within 30 days, allowing limited exceptions to withhold any information. The bill's authors, Kentucky Republican Thomas Massie and California Democrat Ro Khanna, warned the Trump Justice Department will face legal action if it does not fully comply. Claudia Grisales, NPR News.
Pope Leo is speaking out against the treatment of immigrants in the United States. NPR's Jason DeRose has more.
Talking to reporters just outside Rome, Leo drew attention to a statement passed by U.S. bishops last week. The pontiff said violence against immigrants is troubling.
We have to look for ways of treating people humanely, treating people with the dignity that they have. If people are in the United States illegally, there are ways to treat that. There are courts. There's a system of justice.
He pointed to immigrants in the U.S. who've lived what he called good lives in the country for decades. Leo said that while there are many problems in the U.S. immigration system, the protection of human dignity and national security are compatible. Jason DeRose, NPR News.
Target issued a cautious forecast on holiday spending today. NPR's Scott Horsley reports it's one of several clues investors are watching as they try to assess the strength of the U.S. economy.
Discount retailer Target says customers are keeping a tight grip on their pocketbooks, with most of their spending devoted to food and other essentials. Spending on discretionary items like home furnishings is down. Target reported a drop in same-store sales for the most recent quarter and lowered its profit forecast for the full year. A federal judge ruled Facebook's parent company does not have a monopoly in the social networking space. The decision means Meta will not have to spin off its Instagram or WhatsApp features. And new figures from the Commerce Department show the nation's trade deficit shrank in August as higher tariffs by the government shutdown. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
Wall Street's trading in mixed territory at this hour. The Dow is down 43 points. You're listening to NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from ARM, committed to delivering innovative, advanced computing designed to enable worldwide companies to unleash the capabilities and experiences of AI. The future of AI is built on ARM. ARM.com. This is NPR.
You're listening to WUSF 89.7. I'm Craig Kopp. The Florida Orchestra is going to be working with University of South Florida orchestra students. WUSF's Susan Giles-Wontuck explains.
The Florida Orchestra is the largest professional orchestra in the state, and its music director Michael Francis and resident conductor Chelsea Gallo are internationally acclaimed conductors.
Both Michael Francis and I are artists in residence for the University of South Florida, and it's really cool. We go there and rehearse the orchestra a bit and then perform with them. It's really special. These young musicians are so talented. They're so eager.
The partnership is designed to give USF music students the opportunity to get professional-level experiences and build for their futures. Gallo is leading the USF Symphony Orchestra tomorrow night in a concert at the Zinneber Concert Hall on the Tampa campus. Susan Giles, Wintec, WUSF 89.7 News.
You can find out how to get free tickets to that concert at WUSF.org. Hillsborough County will go ahead with building 2 new schools. The idea stoked heated debate at Tuesday's school board meeting. A new law allows charter schools to request empty space in public schools. That's called co-locating. Board member Stacy Hahn was against the construction, at least until legislators iron out the details of the law that expands the definition of schools of hope.
Moving forward with approximately $180 million in construction, only to have to turn part of these buildings over for co-location would be devastating for our families and students and our financial stability.
However, the board voted 5-2 to proceed. An elementary school will be built north of downtown Tampa alongside Stewart Middle School, which will be reconstructed. The other is a new middle school in Waimama. District officials say that the population is growing in South County and 1,600 more student spaces are needed. I'm Craig Kopp, WUSF 89.7 News.
The legendary Robert Cray Band is bringing the blues to Clearwater. Catch them live at the Billheimer Capitol Theater on February 17th. Tickets are available now. For more information, visit rutheckerdhall.com.
Wake Up Call from WUSF delivers the latest local news to you first thing Monday through Friday. Our newsletter keeps you connected to community, news, culture, national NPR headlines, and more. Sign up for your Wake Up Call at WUSF.org.
This is Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. We're broadcasting from the Doctors Lorraine Rubis and Neil Frankel studio in Tampa. Well, if you live in the Tampa Bay region and you get your electricity from Tampa Electric, you will be paying a little bit more next year. TECO customers' rates are going up by about $5.50 a month in January. And it's not the only power company in Florida raising rates. Florida Power and Light wants to increase rates by about $2.50 a month, and a decision on that is expected this week. We're going to talk about why rates are going up, and we'd like to hear from you as well. How much are you paying for electricity now, and are your electricity rates going up? Give us a call, 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. You can also reach out to us by email, FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. With us is Bradley Marshall. He's an attorney with Earth Justice, which advocates for consumers. Bradley, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it. We're also joined by Abby Blanco, Associate Professor of Economics at the University of Tampa. Abby, thank you as well.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
And of course, if you have questions about the price of electricity or you want to share what you do to keep your power bills down, call us, 813-755-6562. Bradley, let me start with you. One of the reasons power companies give for raising rates is to improve the infrastructure. Here's what TECO told WUSF in an email, quote, "Like utilities across the nation, we face increased costs driven by stronger storms, record heat, and the cost of upgrading a grid built for a different era," end quote. I mean, isn't that a reasonable argument? Bradley?
Hi, sorry, I couldn't hear you before, but I can hear you now. It would be a reasonable argument if it was true in its entirety, but it's not. TECO also has one of the highest profits in the nation as awarded by the Florida Public Service Commission, and frankly, they've been overbuilding with their capital investments. Brand new headquarters, brand new operations center, brand new power plant to serve as backup power for MacDill Air Force Base. And when you compare it to other utilities around the country, and even within Florida, their bills have gone up far more than other utilities.
But isn't there, there is some value or there's some merit in the idea that you do have to kind of either rebuild from a storm or strengthen infrastructure or just kind of fix stuff up because, it's been noted by a lot of folks that America's electricity grid is a bit old, a bit flaky in a lot of places, and it just kind of needs some work.
Absolutely, and that is certainly part of it. But beyond that is the excessive profits that TECO is allowed to make on its capital investments, far more than other utilities are nationwide. I mean, by comparison, for example, Jacksonville's utility, JEA, is a municipally owned utility. In 2019, before the pandemic, their bills in August were actually higher for residential customers than TECO's bills. But now, and JEA, obviously, Jacksonville faces a lot of the same issues that Tampa Electric does. They're in Florida. They face hurricane and storm threats, have to harden their infrastructure. In that same time period now, and we just got the data for August of this year, the average residential customer in Jacksonville is now paying almost $80 less in the month of August than that same customer would be in TECO's territory.
Abby, how does it work? How does the system work in terms of how utilities raise their rates? Because they have to go and kind of argue the case, right? And then a decision is made by the Utilities Commission, the Florida Public Utilities Commission. Like, how is that decision getting made?
Sure. So to really understand what's going on with TECO, we have to know a little bit of something about government utilities or government granted utility monopolies more generally. So that is what they are. So TECO is a government granted monopoly. Now, there are legitimate reasons for potentially doing this. It's really difficult to build out a power grid. You could think about if you had multiple competing power companies, like imagine the power lines everywhere. It's hard to generate enough capital to create a utility system. Now, in theory, the regulators, as you described, are supposed to protect consumers from excessive rate hikes. But one of the things that we learn from economics, specifically political economy, is that there are certain dynamics between utilities like TECO and their regulators, which kind of tips the scale in favor of the utilities.
Okay. We're just, if you're just joining us, I should say, on Florida Matters Live and Local, we're talking about the rising cost of electricity. Love to hear from you as well. How much do you pay currently? Are you expecting your electricity bill to go up? And what are you trying to do to keep the price down or pay less for power? I guess 813-755-6562 is the number. You can also reach out to us by email, FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. I mean, we have reported on population growth too. I mean, isn't that another reason? Like, more people, you're going to have more power for them. You've got to sort of build out more lines and things. So would that also be sort of sending those price hikes up a bit?
So it could be. Now, there's something else that's important to understand, which is how TECO makes money. So TECO is paid based on the assets that they own, not necessarily the electricity that they generate. So as TECO builds more, so in this current round of rate hikes, and it's important to note this is the fourth one within a year.
And we should add some of those are to do with like kind of storm assessments and other kind of things that have been tacked on as well.
Yes. But the other thing that those kinds of assessments do, so when we talk about, grid resiliency, or we talk about building out solar capacity or building in more safety features for storms, all of those are things that really appeal to regulators. Whether or not it's actually doing those things is another question. Because when regulators go to make decisions about whether or not a rate hike is appropriate or inappropriate, they have to rely on the data from the professionals in generating electricity. Whose data do they wind up using? They wind up using TECO's. But you see there that we have a very clear conflict of interest because TECO is not going to present to the Public Utilities Commission information that would bias a decision against them.
You're listening to Florida Matters Live and Local. We're talking about the rising cost of electricity. Some power prices are going up. TECO, for example, those customers is going to see a rate hike in January, and I'd like to know how much you're paying and whether your power bill is going up. 813-755-6562 is the number. You can reach out to us by email, FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Bradley Marshall, do you think, there's another huge utility, FPL, also asking for a rate increase. I mean, are they making the same argument for increasing their rates as well?
They are. They are saying that this is an investment to, because of population growth, inflation, And actually, during that hearing, where we go in front of the commission and are able to cross-examine witnesses, we actually cross-examined their witness and said, how much of these capital investments, how much of your rate-based growth can be explained by population increase and inflation combined together, multiply those together, and it's less than half. I mean, what we have is runaway capital spending that isn't really being checked by any regulatory process.
Let's go to the phones. We've got Diana calling in. Diana, you're on the air.
I just want to say that I don't think it makes sense to talk about how high a person's bill is, because how high a bill is depends on how much energy they use. It makes sense to talk about rates per kilowatt hour, and my rates per kilowatt hour with Peace River are extremely low, incredibly low, and I would be happy to pay more if they would convert from coal and natural gas to more solar. And I know they're going to do some, but if they would really make an effort to go down, to no more than 20% fossil fuel, I would be very happy to pay more. My bills are very low here. I mean, under 100 half the year and 120, 130 the rest of the year. And that's because I don't try to make my house like, a California house or a northern house. It's Florida. I live with, 82, 83, 84 degrees in my house. I'm fine with that.
That's bold.
At night, 79 is perfectly fine. And windows are open now because
it's nice and dry. Right. Yeah, I know the feeling. Being able to crack your window is quite nice. Diana, thank you so much for the call. I mean, I'm not sure a lot of folks might be thinking, Abby, 82 degrees is a little too warm. I mean, it's probably a little warm for me if I'm trying to work or something. But that's another kind of factor into consideration to how is this power generated?
Sure. So we can definitely talk about or think about things like usage rates and how much customers are using, things like square footage, how well insulated your house is. All of those are going to play a role. I think it is relevant to note, though, as the caller mentioned, that these rate increases are not just blanket. At least several of them are based on kilowatt hours. And so it's not necessarily just this one rate hike that we're thinking about, but we're looking at, again, these 4 hikes over the span of a year, looking to add just about $940 on average per year to the average TECO customer's bill.
Bradley, what about that idea of, kind of where that power comes from, though? We heard the caller saying, look, happy to pay more if it means converting away from coal. I mean, that's as an Earth Justice attorney, I'm sure that's something that you're thinking about as well, how that power gets made.
Absolutely. But we've maintained all along, and the utility zone data shows that, adding in more solar power is usually very economic, as long as they're not allowed to make too much profit on it, et cetera. And because it displaces fuel prices, which can be quite volatile and add a lot onto people's electric bills, depending on what's happening with fuel prices. And so adding in more solar acts as a natural hedge against fuel price volatility. But it isn't necessarily, it isn't, the solar investments on their own are not what's adding a lot to people's bills in around the Tampa Bay region. It's all the other investments that the utility is making that don't have that kind of payback, plus how much profit they're allowed to make on those investments that's driving bills higher.
We're going to have to leave the conversation there, but Bradley Marshall, Senior Attorney with Earth Justice, thank you so much for your insights. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And Abby Blanco, Associate Professor of Economics at the University of Tampa. Abby, thank you too.
Always a pleasure.
Okay, coming up next on Florida Matters Live and Local, whether you own a home or rent it, property taxes can have an impact on your life. You can hear about some of the proposed property tax laws up for discussion in Tallahassee. That's when Florida Matters Live and Local returns. Stay with us.
Listener support powers WUSF. And laying for 100 more, leading the region in quality health care since 1925. Learn more at smh.com/100.
This is Aisha Roscoe with NPR. That extra car that you don't really use, that car could be worth hundreds of dollars in support or more as a donation. Think about it.
I'm Alyssa Nadworny. We'll take a closer look at how President Trump's base is following developments now that Congress has voted to release the files on late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. And Australia prepares to ban social media accounts for people younger than 16 years old. It's the first country in the world to do so. Next time on Here and Now.
Join us this afternoon from 1 to 3 on WUSF 89.7.
This is Florida Matters, live and local. I'm Matthew Petty. Property taxes could be a big part of the discussion for the upcoming legislative session. And whether you own a home or you rent, property taxes help pay for things that you probably use, like emergency services, roads, schools. Everyone has a stake in property taxes. WUSF's Douglas Soul is with the Your Florida team reporting from Tallahassee on how decisions made there affect Floridians everywhere. He's back for an update on property taxes. Douglas, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, so we've heard some of what's been going on. We've spoken to you on Florida Matters Live and Local a couple of times about the back and forth between lawmakers and the governor on property tax proposals. What is happening this week?
Yeah, so there's a big development coming this week. A Florida House committee that was created to review property tax proposals is reviewing a list of them on Thursday. So we get to see what lawmakers in person have to say about them.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to get into a bit about what these bills are, but let's just back up a bit first and remind us what's led up to where we are now. The governor is no fan of property taxes. What has he said?
Governor Ron DeSantis has been loud about wanting property tax changes for months now. At first, it sounded like DeSantis wanted to get rid of the tax in its entirety. His messaging is now focused on the property tax specifically applied to homeowners.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't seen a specific proposal from him, though. DeSantis believes the tax is too expensive, especially considering how expensive everything else is right now.
Yeah.
He's also against it in principle. He views it as paying rent to the government. He questions how someone can truly own their home if they have to pay the government for it.
Yeah, and we heard him sort of intimate last time he was talking about this that maybe he'll call a special session right in the middle of primary season and kind of hold that over the heads of lawmakers to kind of get them to toe the line.
Yeah, he has said that, and I think a big question is, what do we see from the legislature leading up to the regular session that begins in January, and what do we see during that 2-month regular session?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of waiting and seeing right now.
We're talking with Douglas Soul from WUSF's Your Florida team. He's telling us about what the latest is on property taxes, some of the proposals there. Now, there is kind of a laundry list, right? I mean, there's like 7 proposals, maybe more than that, on property taxes coming from the House. 5 of them address so-called non-school property taxes. Explain a little bit what's going on there.
Yeah, so all of the proposed constitutional amendments are aimed at cutting down on what people are paying for the property tax. For example, one would get rid of non-school homestead property taxes. Another would phase it out over time. Yet another would exempt seniors from paying non-school homestead property taxes. At this point, you're noticing I'm saying non-school a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's because the House is wary of cutting funding to schools, which are very reliant on the property tax and already facing funding issues. So the House is indicating that it wants to leave intact the portion of the tax that goes to school systems. The House proposals also specify affected local governments, who obviously get a lot of funding through the property tax,
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be able to make law enforcement cuts.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, is there talk of other things being carved out? Like, are people worried about law enforcement or emergency services being affected if they cut property taxes significantly?
Yeah, there's a lot of those concerns. Of course, the House proposal specifically says that there can't be law enforcement cuts, but there's a lot of other services local governments provide.
Yeah.
And especially small rural counties that are already cash-strapped are voicing concerns.
Now, these are all ballot amendments, right? So if they make it onto the ballot, it would be up to the voters to decide. Just explain why it has to happen that way for property tax proposals specifically.
Yeah, that's a great question, Matthew. There's one bill being considered by the Property Tax Committee tomorrow that makes technical changes via statute. That one doesn't need the ballot, but the rest of the list are ballot proposals, also known as proposed constitutional amendments.
Mm-hmm.
See, the legislature doesn't have the constitutional power to make big property tax changes through law, as the tax is embedded in the state constitution. This means 3/5 of the legislature would have to approve these proposals for them to make the ballot. 2026 election voters would then have to approve it by a threshold of at least 60% or 3/5 as well.
Yeah, and I imagine some of this is going to be up for discussion tomorrow, but is it typical to see just a bunch of bills kind of focused on the same thing and then they just see which floats to the surface and which makes it through?
Good question, and it's part of the conversation, actually. Governor Ron DeSantis isn't impressed and he isn't happy with that list of proposals. He views having so many as a political game that would lead all of them to failing to pass. He wants just one ballot proposal, it appears. House Speaker Daniel Perez, though, has since said these proposals more represent conversation starters, and Perez says DeSantis and the Senate haven't been forthcoming with specific ideas. And it is true that we haven't heard much from the Senate side about what it might want to do. I'll also mention there was more drama this week. DeSantis says he doesn't support the proposal to exempt the property tax for senior Floridians. He believes young families should benefit from an exemption too.
Huh. That's interesting, but clearly some of what people's concerns are has kind of filtered its way back to lawmakers, especially if we see all this raft of bills, a lot of them having this carve-out for public schools. People are still a little bit concerned about what could potentially happen there if those property taxes are substantially reduced.
That's correct. Local governments especially have been forthright with their concerns. The property tax, of course, funds much of local government's services. Team DeSantis alleges some counties are misspending, but local officials have taken issue with that rhetoric and say the services they provide are needed and even expected by residents. Rural counties, as I touched on before, with already small tax bases, are especially concerned. I recently talked with the commissioner from Wakulla County. That's a rural county, small county near Tallahassee, where I'm currently in. That commissioner said these cuts would mean more than just tightening belts. In his words, they mean severing limbs.
Wow.
House Speaker Perez acknowledged recently that rural counties could receive a hard hit. He even questioned whether some of those counties need to be consolidated, creating yet another line of questioning and controversy related to this issue.
Yeah, I'm sure some of those counties might be a little bit concerned about the idea that they might get merged with another county. Okay, so kind of what happens next? There'll be just some discussion tomorrow during this conversation starter, as you call it. When will we know about a viable proposal in Tallahassee? What can our listeners expect?
As a journalist and just as a citizen covering and interested in these issues, I'm very also interested to see how those conversations go tomorrow. They're going to be a great test, possibly, at what the House might ultimately want to do. As House Speaker Perez said, these are more conversation starters right now. The legislative session starts in a couple of months, less than that. So I would expect more of these conversations leading up to it. And it's going to be a huge deal if nothing happens during the regular session. That's when we start thinking, is there going to be a special session? But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. A lot can happen over the next few months. And I'm sure I'll be returning to this show soon to talk about it.
We'll be happy to speak to you then. Douglas Soul with WUSF's Your Florida team, reporting on how laws passed in Tallahassee affect everyone in Florida. Thank you so much for your reporting and your insights. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for the questions.
Well, coming up next, the longest federal government shutdown ended last week, but it doesn't mean everything's back to normal. We'll take a look at the lingering impact of the shutdown on SNAP benefits and whether some people are still going hungry. That's when Florida Matters live and local continues. Stay with us.
Funding for WUSF comes from listeners like you, and also Seitenbacher, with a new web shop, healthy muesli, cold-pressed oils, and vegetable broth mix delivered to your door. sprites, and more. Details at bachtowergardens.org.
On the next Fresh Air, we'll talk about FBI Director Kash Patel with Mark Fisher, who profiles him in The New Yorker. Fisher writes about conspiracy theories Patel's promoted, how he became FBI director, his firing of FBI agents, and ethical protocols he's challenged. Join us.
Great conversation on Fresh Air tonight at 7 on WUSF.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. Well, the government may have reopened, but things are still not quite back to normal. Some SNAP recipients in Florida may still be waiting to receive their benefits. Even with SNAP benefits, the high price of groceries can make it a bit of a struggle to fill the grocery cart every week. 1 in 8 Floridians receive SNAP benefits, and some of them are at risk of losing their benefits altogether. There are new eligibility requirements coming to SNAP from President Trump's big, beautiful bill. Work exemptions for many vulnerable groups are going away, and those groups previously did not have to work to receive food assistance. Now they do. So, any day now, almost 200,000 people could permanently lose their benefits in Florida. Here to break down what's happening even further and what can be done is Congressman Darren Soto. He's a Democrat representing Florida's 9th Congressional District, just south of Orlando. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us.
Matthew, thanks for having me.
Also joined by Shannon Oliviero. She's the Director of Public Affairs at Feeding Tampa Bay. Shannon, thank you as well.
Thank you for having me.
And if you have questions about the return of SNAP benefits, call and let us know. 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. You can also send us an email, FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. All right, so Congressman, if I could start with you, let's talk about the new requirements for a moment. Now, if you're 54 years or older, or a parent with a child over 14 years old, a veteran, or someone living without housing, you could lose your work waiver. So there's some kind of stipulations there about those work requirements, raising the upper age limit for adults who need to meet work requirements from 54 to 64. So if somebody is 64, they might now have to have a job to receive these SNAP benefits. How are these new requirements going to impact Florida families?
Well, one, the reason these requirements are happening is because the big ugly law cuts SNAP by 20%. It's about a $186 billion cut. And we could see that 20% cut in this next legislative session in Tallahassee, starting up in January. So it'll affect folks in 2027 with a 20 to 25% cut altogether to SNAP. So these are monumental figures. And then there are a lot of folks who are in vulnerable communities that will start having not only the requirements, but they'll also have to fill out the paperwork every quarter. And that's where a lot of people drop off or get disenrolled. Adults up to 65, veterans, homeless, former foster youth, unemployed in high unemployment areas, and parents with dependents now older than 14 years of age, all are now going to be under these requirements. And by the way, most SNAP recipients, about 90%, already work, but now they're going to have to fill out that paperwork, and that's how a lot of people drop off. And of course, some of them have various degrees of disabilities and other frailties that keep them from working. And so that makes a big challenge where you see a bunch of people just get kicked off the rolls.
So, Congressman, is there anything that your office can do? I mean, I'm thinking paperwork, like can your office help folks kind of navigate that paperwork? Because I'm imagining some of it might be a bit complicated to get through.
So traditionally, SNAP constituent services are for state legislators, but we help where we can on those things. But most of the time, that would be your state senator and your state house member. Of course, there are a lot of social workers and food bank professionals and folks in healthcare clinics where that SNAP benefit is absolutely critical. So they can help you with those things. But this is basically put in as a paperwork requirement so that folks who are unwary, they fall off the rolls. And that's one of the main ways you'll see this 20% cut and they're going to have to start making these rules literally in a month and a half for the following year. But a lot of this disenrollment will already start next year. So this is coming upon us a lot faster than a lot of people think. The one other thing I said, because you had mentioned at the top of the hour, as of November 14th, most people have gotten their SNAP benefits for November, but I'm sure there's a few folks, it's a big system, who get lost in the shuffle. So you're going to want to work with either a social worker or someone from DCF or some of our food bank professionals who know the system really well. And of course, our state legislators. And if you have any struggle, you could always reach out to our office and we'll make sure we get you in the right situation.
If you're just joining us on Florida Matters Live and Local, we're talking with Congressman Darren Soto about SNAP benefits. Also with us is Shannon Oliviero of Feeding Tampa Bay. If you've got questions about the return of SNAP benefits or some of the upcoming changes to the work requirements, for example, give us a call, 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. Shannon, so remind me, just who are you seeing at food banks and food pantries? Like who needs help right now?
So really, there are so many working families that need help. We have seniors. We have those that are taking care of children with disabilities. It's a varying degree of people that come through. And then, of course, because of the government shutdown, that timeline, we were distributing 200,000 meals more than we do every week.
And okay, so put that in context for me. How many meals do you normally distribute a week in Tampa Bay?
On an average, 1.7 million meals.
Okay, so that's a pretty significant step up.
Mm-hmm.
Was it hard to make up that extra amount of food?
We are very fortunate to have a lot of partners, and our community supports us and wants to make sure that people have food on their table. So, between the extra 600 volunteer shifts and the funds that we needed, people did step up to help us make sure that people had what they needed.
Mm-hmm. What about the upcoming cuts? I mean, when you hear, a potential 20% cut in folks who would be eligible for SNAP benefits, are you expecting an influx of new people who may now be needing the services of a food bank or a food pantry? And is that going to put extra pressure on the likes of Feeding Tampa Bay and some of the folks that you distribute the food to?
Yeah, we definitely anticipate that our numbers will grow. We also here at Feeding Tampa Bay, we have navigators that can help folks reapply for SNAP and help people walk through that process. That's not something that's decided by us, but we can definitely help navigate reapplying. We also pay attention to all of the information and make sure that we share that out and make sure people are aware that they need to reapply or whatever is coming up for them, to make sure that they have the knowledge of to support them.
We're talking about SNAP benefits on Florida Matters Live and Local. With us is Shannon Oliviero from Feeding Tampa Bay. Also with us, Congressman Darren Soto. If you've got questions about SNAP benefits, maybe wondering about, the length of time it takes to get those SNAP benefits turned back on after the shutdown or upcoming changes to benefit eligibility, give us a call, 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. Congressman, some of these things, the bureaucracy is quite big and unwieldy. It does take a little bit of time to sort of turn things back on. And you mentioned before there could be some people sort of falling through the cracks. Is there a way to make sure that people aren't missing out even when those benefits are coming back on again?
Yes, you want to call your state legislators, and if you're unsure who they are, you could always call our office about that. As you may know, I have East Orlando, South Orlando, all of Osceola County, and parts of Polk County. And then our local food banks and food pantries, as well as our locally federally qualified clinics, are usually very good about helping direct people. But your state legislators are the prime focus. But I could tell you that this SNAP issue is happening. This cut is happening at a time when groceries are going up because of tariffs and mass deportations and a worsening economy. And so, there are things we could do. We could pass a farm bill, which I'm wholly supportive of. We haven't had a new farm bill since 2018 when I'm back on the Ag Committee back then, that would help our local food banks and help our producers. We could stop these mass deportations that are deporting the workforce.
Let me just go back to the farm bill for a moment, if I could, Congressman. How would that help? Like, what would be in it that would help this particular issue? In terms of like helping folks who are on SNAP.
Sure. So one, it would help our food banks, like with Shannon and her organization, Feeding Tampa Bay and Second Harvest, everything from the TFAP program, which provides local meals, to helping out with fresh fruits and vegetables. And they get, especially proteins, which are the most expensive, meats and things like that.
Sure.
they get it subsidized by the Farm Bill, and then the producers, the farmers don't have, most of the farm programs are canceled right now. So your local cattle rancher in Central Florida, in my district, is not getting a lot of the help that they used to get because a lot of those have expired. So through production and through getting this food out and helping our food banks with those who fall through the cracks on SNAP. And then overall, the tariffs are a big part of why groceries have gone up, as well as deportation of so much farm labor. And so there are things we could do between eliminating those two things from happening and passing a farm bill that would make groceries cheaper, or at least stop the massive increases that are happening, as well as improve the safety net of folks outside of SNAP who are helping out. Ultimately, there'll be a big fight in the budget over the next few years on whether we could pull back some of those SNAP cuts. While they're made in Tallahassee next year, they go into effect the following year.
Yeah.
And we have an election between now and then. So if you have some changes in Washington, you might see a lessening of those SNAP benefits. But the exemptions that are being eliminated, they happen next year. So those will already go into effect.
Can I just ask you about the shutdown too? I mean, a lot of your colleagues in the House were unhappy with the way the shutdown ended. Do you think it was worth it? Like, did anything positive come out of it?
So we're able to highlight that Obamacare is rising exponentially without these tax credits that have made it affordable. I have the second most Obamacare of any district in the nation. Florida has the most, 4.6 million people. So we put it in the forefront, and now we're under negotiations. In addition, the president made a choice by fighting all the way up to the Supreme Court on SNAP to try to block it from folks. That was a pressure point that for some folks was too far. We also got protections for federal workers. Obviously I voted no, so that wouldn't be enough for me, but there were some things, and now we got to negotiate to try to stop 75 to 200 to 300% spikes in Affordable Care Act plans for 275,000 people in my district. So in addition to lowering food costs, we have to work on lowering healthcare costs. And so we're going to continue the fight, even if I voted no and wanted to see it. And we'll see less collateral damage now. I'm a Democrat. I believe that government can help solve problems. So this was a last resort situation that now, what's happened has happened. Now we'll live to fight another day, and we won't see an interruption in these benefits in the meantime.
Shannon, if I could come back to you for a moment. I mean, just thinking about what you had to put in extra in terms of extra meals to help folks out during the shutdown, an extra 200,000 or so across the Tampa Bay region, in addition to the 1 million plus that you serve. So what are you anticipating, once that 20% cut in SNAP benefits does kick in, unless something else happens in the meantime? So, with more people needing these services, what does Feeding Tampa Bay have to do to kind of lay the groundwork to make sure people aren't going hungry once there are changes to SNAP benefits?
So we prepare ahead. We have over 400 partners throughout the 10 counties that we serve that will make sure that they're stocked additionally. Just like the government shutdown, we did emergency distributions where over 1,500 people were in line to get groceries. We're continuing some of that through a number of our counties through Thanksgiving because some of those folks who have dropped off and still haven't gotten their benefits yet. But it's just about preparing and gathering our community to support those that don't have what they need. And, like this representative mentioned, 85 to 90% of those on SNAP have a working adult in their household. Things are just too expensive for a lot of people, but we want to make sure that food is on their table, that they have adequate health care, and that they can get on a pathway to stability.
Just in the last 30 seconds or so, too, we're heading up to Thanksgiving. The holiday season is pretty kind of high-pressure time for a lot of families. What are you doing differently this year, if anything, to help people kind of get through that holiday season?
So that's something that we prepare for each year during the holiday season, both at Thanksgiving and at Christmas. We just finished serving 1,000 Thanksgiving full dinners for people to cook at home. We have a brand new facility. We're opening our Causeway Hall to over 300 for a Thanksgiving lunch where folks can make a reservation. And again, we're making sure that those traditional foods are out there so people can go to our partners and our school pantries and make sure that they can celebrate around their table as well.
Shannon Olivero is the Director of Public Affairs at Feeding Tampa Bay. Thank you so much for your insights. Appreciate it, Shannon.
Thank you.
And also we're speaking with Congressman Darren Soto, Democrat representing Florida's 9th Congressional District, just south of Orlando. Congressman Soto, thank you too.
Thanks for having me.
Well, coming up next, it's the new season of It's Florida Man. It returns next week, and we're going to talk with the show's creator, Jeff Tomsic, in just a moment. Stay with us on Florida Matters, live and local.
WUSF thanks Community Foundation Tampa Bay for a generous grant supporting our Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Large Market Radio. Your investment in public media helps us serve our community. Thank you for believing in WUSF.
I'm Jane Clayson. Hester Kaplan felt as though she never knew her father, the acclaimed biographer Justin Kaplan. In trying to discover and understand him, she turned to her father's Pulitzer Prize-winning book on Mark Twain.
He was a very private and hidden man, but he was enormously empathetic and deeply psychological when it came to talking about Twain.
That's next time on Here and Now.
Join us this afternoon from 1 to 3 on WUSF 89.7.
On the Bay Blend podcast, we take you to places in the greater Tampa Bay region you might not know about, like when I saw a big treehouse at Bonnet Springs Park in Lakeland.
Are you guys renting that out? Could I,
We do rent it out. If you want to have your birthday party there, you can absolutely.
Oh, no, I meant to live, because that's about as big as my apartment. I'm Sky LeBron, and join me every weekday morning on the Bay Blend for your quick hit of the news, culture, and events. That's the Bay Blend, wherever you listen to your podcasts, or at WUSF.org.
Connect to the greater Tampa Bay region first thing weekday mornings with Wake Up Call from WUSF. Local news, events info, culture, and more. Sign up for your wake-up call today at WUSF.org.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. From an alligator taking a man's arm to a witch harassing the mermaid next door, it's Florida Man. A comedy series on HBO Max features some pretty outlandish stories from around the state. They're retold by the people from the stories, but they're acted by real actors like Adam Devine and Juliette Lewis. Each account is backed by news stories, experts, and witnesses, and boy, is it Florida.
What you're about to see may be misguided, dangerous, illegal, and most definitely stupid. But it's also all true, sort of.
The people are quirky, the stories are kooky, but they're real, sort of. Each episode works to take the stigma out of the story by breaking down the facts behind the headlines and how the people involved were affected. Soon you can see new episodes of It's Florida Man on HBO Max. Until then, you can hear more about the show from our guest today, Jeff Tomsic, creator, director, and executive producer of It's Florida Man. Jeff, thank you so much for speaking with me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. So glad to be here.
So I want to ask you about season 2, but let me just rewind, if I could, to season 1 for a moment. In one episode, you tell the story of a man whose arm was taken off by an alligator, and that's actually an incident that happened not too far from our studios here in Tampa in the Myakka River. He turned out to be okay, surprisingly. I mean, this kind of gives you an idea of the flavor of the shows that you're featuring on It's Florida Man. What made you want to feature that particular story on the first season?
Well, it just felt like such a quintessential Floridian story of a gator attack and survival. And then the details in that story alone were pretty nuts. The guy dove into Myakka Lake completely naked and had his arm bitten off and then survived with no health care and no clothes for 3 straight days in Myakka Lake Swamp. And if you've been there, you know that's a pretty unforgiving environment.
Yeah. So tell me about the process of deciding what stories to feature. Actually, before we go into that, let me just kind of run through a couple of the highlights from season 2. One story is about a fellow who decides to steal an entire casino boat, and that's because he basically wants to take revenge on the state for seizing his dog. You also got the story of a Sarasota man who heads into the Everglades looking for the elusive skunk ape. So that's just a couple of the episodes coming up in season 2. But how do you come up with these stories? Because they are pretty wild.
It's a surprisingly difficult process of finding the stories. I think everyone's familiar with the meme and these Florida Man does this, that, or the other thing headlines. But when you dig under the surface, a lot of them are people with pretty severe problems or pretty long rap sheets. And I really made this show as a love letter to Florida. I live here. I love it here. I find the people fascinating. My intent was really to see these people that at first you think are crazy, and then when you watch these stories, you think maybe these guys have life figured out and you don't. That there's something wild and outlawish in their perspective on life that is hopeful and effervescent rather than depressing. But that's the trick. So we have a spreadsheet of thousands of stories, literally, there were headlines or submissions from people. And we really have to talk to everyone involved once we think that there's a compelling narrative there and just see what that outlook is. What's that X factor that really makes it optimistic rather than just sad.
I mean, they are sort of like documentaries, right? Because you're having these reenactments that are blended in with interviews with the people who actually went through and experienced these events.
That's exactly right. We start with the real people and we do interviews. And it's surprising, we do pre-interviews, but they're pretty quick. So we only get a modicum of what that story is, just the seed. And then once you start talking to these people, so much unfolds and you realize how their lifestyle or their perspective on life has led them to this place. And often it's pretty surprising. The narrative comes from there. And my role is that never really, of course we take huge comedic leaps in the show, but I try to only take my cues from these real people and not just make spoof or make fun of these characters, because I try to respect them as human beings always, and look at them as people that might have just a different way of charging at life than I do.
I was going to say, it's kind of interesting because I think in different hands, it could be a very different show, right? But you've sort of been able to ground it in some reality and also add some nuance to what could just be straight up comedy or farce.
I'm happy to hear you say that. It was a big criteria for me going into the show that we weren't punching down ever. Not only did I love the idea of making a show about Florida, but Florida is so diverse. There's so many worlds within this one state. Almost all of America seems to be represented here, for better or for worse. But I didn't want to go into this using people. I wanted to just see people that you normally don't see on television and show these crazy other ways of living life that maybe had never occurred to us outside the realm of this kind of insanity.
Looking at the list of actors too who've signed up for season 2, Tiffany Haddish, Johnny Knoxville, Adam Devine, Taika Waititi, it's an A-list cast. Like, has the show sort of developed its own momentum where you now have people sort of knocking on the door and saying, I want a part of this?
Well, I think now that we're in season 2, it's less scary for actors. They've seen the show. They know it's fun and funny. They've heard from their friends that it's just a way to play around, especially when you're talking to some of these big actors. Usually what they have to do is, ship to overseas and spend months sitting in a trailer. And it's a lot of fun just to kind of play with your friends for a couple of days and do something really silly. I think that's the allure. Also, a lot of these guys are my friends, and I've dragged them into it just by pestering them, really, because the show is very low budget. We don't have a lot, we're not paying Taika Waititi or Tiffany Haddish their usual paycheck. They just do it to kind of out of friendship and fun.
Yeah.
And Taika actually insisted to be in the show. He's a good friend and insisted to have the role in the show, which I was surprised by because he's a pretty busy man.
Yeah. So How
Are
did
you Kiwi? Are you Kiwi, Matthew?
I am, yes. That's why I had to bring that up. I mean, I was kind of tickled to see that name in there because he does a lot too. I mean, he's directing, he's acting, he's kind of a comedic genius, and he's got his hand in a lot of different things. So it's great to see
Well, you'll
him
be happy
on the
that
screen.
you'll happy to see that Jermaine Clement is also in the show this season.
That's amazing.
That's a surprise. So I tried to get as many Kiwis as possible.
There can never be enough Kiwis in a TV show, in my opinion, but I may be a little biased. I mean, you're from Florida, like you live here, so how did the idea come about? Was it just kind of reading headlines and sort of letting that saturate over the years?
Well, it originally came from Danny McBride and his company Roughhouse. They knew that I was a wackadoodle Floridian myself, and we've been trying to work together for probably a decade, coming up with movies and other TV shows, and this seemed just so obvious. And I love the idea. Like I was saying, I didn't want to make fun of Florida. I wanted to show the insanity in sort of a loving way. And I know that Danny and Jody and David and all the guys involved with Roughhouse, that's how they look at this stuff generally. They sort of handle the beauty and insanity with equal brilliance.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a kind of a dream come true to me, is to hear from them and to be brought in by them.
You mentioned before that you get people writing in. Like, is there kind of a submission process, or do people just hear about the show and think, I've got a story for you?
A little of both. The first season, we mostly looked at existing headlines and then sought those people out. This season, we asked for people to volunteer their stories almost exclusively. So some of that came unprompted. We did Facebook ads and radio ads, and we had tons and tons of people submitting to the show. It was a lot to go through, but it had a different flavor this season because people were volunteering, and they were much more forthright about their own mistakes in life and what they'd learned through the process of these. And I think you'll see that more this season than you did necessarily last season. It's a lot of sort of redemption stories.
Mm-hmm.
Almost all of them are redemption stories, which was fun.
I wonder too, though, I mean, Florida isn't the only state where there's a lot of crazy headlines. So why not say Alabama man or Mississippi man?
We've talked about that. I mean, let's make it a whole franchise. The whole country has things to say,
mm-hmm.
for sure. We were drafting off of this internet craze, but really that's just the starting point. I have all these other states.
And it does sound like you've got a lot of material just to work through from this first couple of seasons. Like, do you have a plan for more seasons beyond this, or is it just take it as it comes?
It looks, I can't say for sure, but it looks very positive that we'll be moving into the next season now. It's still soon. And we don't know whether people are going to watch the show again or not. So, but I'm hopeful. Yeah, there is a lot of stuff that we couldn't use this season, and that I'd love to shoot and work on. And I'm sort of, every season we're learning a lot. It's a surprisingly difficult show, even though it's just a quick comedy, but there's a touch of journalism built in, or a lot of it is. And so there's a lot of X factors in there that you can't control. It's not like you're just mostly booking actors who will show up to work and say the lines and contribute. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, which is the story of Florida itself in many ways, right?
Yeah. But trust me, when I'm trying to execute a budget and schedule, I have to remind everyone involved that, there's a reason these people are in these headlines often, and it's not for their punctuality.
We're going to have to leave it there, but Jeff Tomsic, executive producer, creative director, and show creator of It's Florida Man. Jeff, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Matthew.
And season 2 of It's Florida Man debuts on HBO Max on November 28th. Well, tomorrow on Florida Matters Live and Local, if you or your kid is headed off to college, you'll probably want to hear about changes for the Department of Education that could impact how you pay for college. We'll talk to experts about what you need to know when filling out your FAFSA. You can send your questions for the experts to us at FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Leave us a voice message at 813-755-6562. And tune in tomorrow. Our executive producer is Grayson Doctor. Our producer is Emily Horace. Lily Belcher is our intern. Our engineers are Jackson Harp and Gio Garvin. Jackson composed our theme music, and Natalie Jaron handled the video today. Subscribe to Florida Matters wherever you get your podcasts, and you can also watch on WUSF's YouTube channel. I'm Matthew Petty. Thanks for being with us, and we'll be back this time tomorrow.
Joyful Journeys presents Fran Blum, author of Think Rich, Get Rich, Stay Rich.